Well, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. My name is Seth Spencer. I'm the Teach Climate Network Coordinator for Climate Generation, the host of this professional development workshop series. I am thrilled to have Patrick Chandler of so many different organizations, groups, the Climate Literacy Network, Clean series, and NOAA's Climate Program Office, who I'll be turning it over to in just a minute. But hopefully this is not the first workshop you've participated in this year, but climate generation is focused on igniting and sustaining the ability of educators, youth, and communities to act on the systems that perpetuate the climate crisis through overcoming science disinformation, really centering anti-racism and systemic equity in the work that we do, and personalizing and localizing climate change action. Well, thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenter today. Patrick, go for it.
Thank you, Seth. Glad to be here. I'll get my presentation up and running for you. Okay, does that look all right? Thanks. All right. So as Seth mentioned, I wear a few different hats, but they're all kind of pulled together under the umbrella of the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, CLEAN. CLEAN was founded about 15 years ago in response to the publication of the first set of climate literacy principles that really guided educators and outreach professionals on what the key points were for understanding climate change and communicating about it. CLEAN is co-chaired by the NOAA Climate Program Office and the Cooperative Institute for Research in Environmental Sciences at CU Boulder, and I bounce back and forth between both. There are three main parts of CLEAN. We have an awesome collection of educational resources, teacher support, and a community of practice that includes a listserv and webinar and professional developments like you're attending today, and a few other elements that you can investigate on our website. The thing that really sets CLEAN apart is the quality and integrity of our resources. Everything that comes to us undergoes an incredibly rigorous process. First, our team looks at it and decides if we should move that resource forward. Then we bring it to a climate specialist and an education specialist to look at it from the lens of their expertise. And if it passes both of those reviews, it goes on to a review camp where a group of four scientists and educators and topic specific specialists will take a look at that resource and see if it should move forward into the collection, and if it should double check all the notes included with it, which are the pedagogy, technical aspects of that resource, how to bring it into the classroom, and anything else they think that an educator might want to know. So we're really proud of our collection. We've reviewed about 40,000 resources over the past 15 years, and our collection is just under 1,000. So we're hoping that you can dive in and use this at your leisure. And we also have that teaching guidance section, which I'll be diving into today for the National Climate Assessment Teaching Guidance. We make sure that anything that we have in that section has the same rigor and integrity of what we have in our resource collection. So again, I hope you take some time to explore it. There's a lot there. Today, we're going to focus on climate literacy and the National Climate Assessment. I'm going to dive into a little overview on climate literacy to start, and then we'll go to the National Climate Assessment itself and our educator support resources. So I'd like you to take a moment. A lot of the folks in this room, I'm sure, teach about and engage with climate topics in a variety of ways, but I wonder if you've stopped and asked yourself this question: what does climate literacy mean to you? There are a lot of answers here, a lot of ways to engage with this, but I'd like you to actually take a moment and respond with one element of climate literacy, what it means to you. If you could put that in the chat, that would be great. We'll take just a moment, let folks get that in there. You can think about this as what it means to you from a teaching or learning perspective, or a community perspective, or a society perspective, any way you want to engage. What is one element of climate literacy for you? Awesome. Getting a lot of great things in the chat. I really encourage you to consider this question so that you're bringing your lens to this topic as you're teaching it. When we look at the NOAA definition of climate literacy, it's understanding the system, understanding how to decide what is credible information, being able to communicate about it, and having what you need to make informed and responsible decisions. However, this is a lot packed into this definition. And I want to remind you that you don't need to feel like you have to do all of this for your students all at once, or do all of it over the course of a year. From a student perspective, the goal is that they get all of this as they move through their education. So you don't need to feel like this is huge and overwhelming. If you want to just focus on one piece of the climate system on Earth, that's contributing to climate literacy in a really important way. Also, as an individual, you don't necessarily need to have all of this yourself, or at least be an expert in all of it. A lot of climate literacy is about community knowledge and holding this system together as a community. And the goal is that when we're addressing these problems, we have folks in the room that are experts in each one of these pieces of this definition. So do your best not to feel overwhelmed by it, and feel encouraged to engage with the aspects of climate literacy that are most meaningful and applicable to you, and present those pieces to your students. In order to expand on that definition of climate literacy, we have these guiding principles that are the key points of understanding climate change. The first four are really focused on the system, looking at the way that we have energy coming in and what happens when it does, and how we change that system through our engagement with it. The fifth one is really looking at how we know everything we do about the system. And at this point, we know a lot. We really have been studying this for a long time, and our tools are excellent. The sixth one is highlighting that human impact. Seventh is saying we know we're impacting, it's going to have consequences. And this overall guiding principle here is meant to be woven throughout all of these seven, recognizing that we can take action to lessen our impacts, to change the way we navigate these systems, and that we have agency within it. These are the original climate literacy principles that were published in 2009 and largely drove the NGSS climate aspects that were published in a few years later, 2013. And you probably recognize some of this from there. But I also want to highlight the most recent research that came out for the National Climate Assessment, which was published in 2013, really highlights where we are now. And when we look at what we can take away from that assessment and how things have evolved, there's some really important things that are going on here. And when we dive into the National Climate Assessment, see if you can spot these specifically. So the first thing that happened is we got more specific. In our original climate literacy principles, we were saying, boy, you should know something about a lot of different elements of the system. You should know the natural cycles and compare that to how we're influencing those cycles. It's a huge amount of information. With these new principles, it's saying, okay, here's what's up. We know what we're talking about. We really, really do. And instead of keeping that at the fifth principle, we bumped it right up to number one. And then we know that what's happening is we are burning things that are creating greenhouse gas, and that's warming the earth. It took so much of that other stuff and said, this is how we can zoom in. And if students walk away with that knowledge, we're burning things, causing greenhouse gas, and it's warming the earth. Then they know enough about the system to have agency within it and create change. We also, in this latest climate report, really highlight climate justice, recognizing that a lot of the causes of climate change, a lot of this burning stuff happened and was done by the communities and societies that had the most means and ability to burn the most stuff, and that many of the impacts are being felt by those who did the least to cause it. Another important aspect of this national climate assessment is splitting apart adaptation and mitigation and holding them as equally important and both necessary to act on quickly. I think that sometimes in the past, communicating about climate change, it was we need to take climate action, but breaking it apart and saying we need to adapt to form more resilient communities and mitigate the impacts of future climate change so that those resiliency measures are meaningful in the context of the changes to come. So both important, both need to happen now. And this last takeaway from the National Climate Assessment is really pivotal. It's basically saying that we should not give up hope. There is so much hope that we can do this well and quickly and effectively. And I think that in the early years of climate education and communication, we did some things that may have caused some harm as far as maintaining hope. The first thing that we did is we said, all right, we need you to know about climate change. We really need you to know. And we said that loud and clear and effectively. And when you look at data sets like the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, you can see that the vast majority of Americans acknowledge climate change and acknowledge that it's human caused. So we did that well, but what we didn't do when we did that for the past 10 or 15 years is stop and say, you need to know about climate change, it's happening, and in order to hold that weight and knowledge, we're going to give you the tools to navigate the systems that are in your communities, that are in your states and in your country, to have agency to act upon the knowledge that you've been given, to process the emotions that come with it that can be incredibly overwhelming. We stop short of the systems thinking and the holistic approach to climate change that's necessary to be really supportive to society and to students. So this hope part dives into that a bit more. And I also just want to mention something that is not happening in the National Climate Assessment that we've stepped away from in the realms of education and communication is forming these boundaries of, if we cross this line, that's it. Wait, if we cross that line, we're done, because that's pretty detrimental. We're going to cross all the lines. We're going to cross 1.5. We're probably going to cross 2 degrees warming. And saying that that is a place we can't cross or else, and then crossing it, really, I think, leads to apathy and sadness and a lack of hope. And so changing that dialogue to a spectrum of climate change that is continually happening, in which we are never taking action that's meaningless. Our actions are always important to keep from going further down that spectrum. And if we don't take action, we will keep traveling down it. So there's never a time in which action isn't meaningful, and there's never a time in which inaction is not impactful. And holding on to that fact, I think, lends that hope, that feeling of agency to say we have to keep moving forward in the space, keep supporting each other with systems approaches, and taking action, holding agency for ourselves and our students. Okay, that's a lot to say that this 5th National Climate Assessment is really awesome. There is so much here, so much ground covered, so many important topics that it navigates. And well, I'm guessing that many folks will have heard of this just in case you haven't, this is the national analog to the IPCC report. This is our nation's best comprehensive research on climate change from multiple different frames. So I'd like to step back from my slideshow for a moment and into the national climate itself. Gina, if you could throw that link in the chat, and ask that you take a moment. Even if you're familiar with this assessment, there's so much here, I doubt you've covered it all. In a second, I'm going to ask you to look at the chapters. Not yet, though. Let me give you some tools for navigating. The chapters cover a lot of ground. If you're not familiar with the report, this overview can be very helpful. If you're looking at the physical science, these two chapters are great. The topics cover a lot of specific ways to look at climate change and impacts, and specific things that will be impacted. This realm of economics and social systems and justice are new chapters for this fifth report. So I encourage you to really jump into those. And what we're going to switch to in a little while is the regional focus, because that's what I focused on for the educator guides. But the response chapters are really impactful too. There's a lot of great stuff here. So let's take a moment. And when you choose a chapter, I'm going to ask that you take a look at the overview. There's going to be a set of key messages, and open one key message, just one, and take a look through it. I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to do this. So I know you're not going to be able to get all the way through probably one key message, but let's take a minute. Go ahead and jump into the National Climate Assessment, choose a chapter, and read the intro and open up one key message. I'm going to give you about 1 more minute, and then I'm going to ask you to put one thing in the chat that you found interesting about what you just read. So as you're taking this last moment, think about what you want to put in there. I see a few folks already putting things in the chat. If you haven't switched back to the call, please do so and put one thing in the chat that you found interesting from your investigation. There is so much in this report. And we'll have things continue to trickle in there. Thank you for posting those notes. It's fun to see this knowledge distilled like this and see what a lot of different folks were investigating. So as I'm sure you felt when you were jumping in there, there's just a huge amount in this report. And it's not meant to be read through or digested all at once. It's really meant for you to check in with things as needed and have a basic knowledge of what's here. Just for fun, I also wanted to mention that this report has a download page where you can download any and all chapters, many of them in Spanish. So if something really struck you and you'd like to make sure you have it at your fingertips, I would very much encourage you to go ahead and download it. And you can see everything's available there. So that's really cool. So for the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, we work closely with the best data we can from our own scientists at Ceres and from those at NOAA and other federal agencies. So every national climate assessment, we like to take the report and take the regional chapters and create an educator's guide from those chapters. In this educator's guide, we take some information directly from the National Climate Assessment, a few of the key figures, the intro, and then with the key messages, we create guiding questions for each of those. And each guiding question includes a lesson or two and a video or two from our collection. We included a few things not from our collection too that we reviewed pretty rigorously, but some things were very specific. And while they wouldn't fit into a national collection on climate education, we did want to include them in this guide. So some of the videos aren't from the collection, but all of them are high quality and very applicable to the guiding questions and the key messages there. Those guiding questions aren't meant to be definitive. It's not like these are the guiding questions for the key messages, and the resources aren't meant to be exhaustive. Rather, those guiding questions are meant to provide you examples that might be a good fit for you, or that might help you to think about what guiding questions would best fit for your students or audience as you're investigating those key messages. And those examples are, again, meant to spur you to think about what might be useful in addressing those guiding questions. We also had a few submissions from the Art by Climate section, which I'll talk more about in a little bit, and some classroom level action steps that could be taken for each region. I'll touch more on those in a second, but what I would like you to do next, Gina, would you mind putting the link to Clean in the chat? I'm going to ask you to go to the Clean website. In our teaching guidance pages, you will find in the second orange row the National Climate Assessment. Go ahead and open it. Go to a region of your choice and take a look at one key message and the guiding questions. You can take a look at the resources under it. But what I'd like you to consider is whether those guiding questions work for you or not. If not, what guiding question would you ask regarding that key message? So go ahead and go to Clean, navigate your way to the National Climate Assessment. That's from our homepage to the teaching guidance section, down to the National Climate Assessment. Choose your favorite region, whether it's yours or one of interest, and investigate the guiding questions for one key message. In case you'd like the direct link, give you a minute or two to do this and really hone in on whether those guiding questions are useful to you or not. If you find one that you really like, that you think you could use to explore a key message, pop it in the chat. And if you have a guiding question that comes to you to explore that message that is not there, please throw that in the chat. So after you've investigated the key message, put a guiding question of your own or from that set into the chat. Give about 2 minutes for folks to do that. Thanks, y'all, for jumping in and participating. Go ahead and move back to the presentation here. So if I go back to a chapter on clean there, y'all just investigated the key message section here. And hopefully popped open the resources to see what those were all about. If you don't find resources that fit your guiding question, whether it's one from here or if you're teaching a different grade than is applicable to the resources listed, you can go to our clean collection and type in your topic or guiding question here, and you will likely find a number of applicable resources. If I type in a topic, I can get very specific by sorting by the resource type, by the grade level, climate literacy principle, and other things as well. So you can use that to really dial in what you're looking for. But let's go ahead and move down in the chapter that you had open there. I want to take a moment and look at these pathways to action. When it comes to climate action, I think in an educational context, it's very useful to look at classroom level climate action. When that topic comes up, a lot of it is focused either on community or state or national climate action or individual climate action. Individual climate action is problematic for a few reasons. There are equity concerns there because not all students have an equal ability to take the same actions. And there are also concerns around feeling strong agency with individual action because it can feel like a drop in the bucket to the problem you're addressing. And some of those bigger actions also feel somewhat inaccessible to students oftentimes, even though students have done great things in pushing forward policy and leaning into their legislators and doing things in their community. But usually that's not the first thing they do. So it really helps to build up that action capacity by engaging in classroom level climate action, and it overcomes some of those concerns of individual climate action. For these pathways to action offered in the chapters, I formatted them by looking at an overall description of the action. Many of these came from drawdown.org, Project Drawdown, which is a great resource if you're not familiar. They list a lot of climate solutions, but they do so on a global level. And so taking those and making them applicable to a more local or regional focus is really helpful if you're going to investigate them with students. So taking a overall solution for climate change, then using the climate resiliency toolkit, which is another really amazing resource. If you're not familiar, let's take a look at that real quick. Those climate resiliency toolkit case studies feature case studies from all over the country. You can see here, so you can almost definitely find something for your region and an action that feels applicable to the key message you want to address or what you want to investigate there. I'll pop that in the chat so you have it. But again, these may not be accessible to students. So going from an overall solution to a regional case study from the Climate Resiliency Toolkit, and then bringing that to a classroom level action, there's a number of different tools that help get to that classroom level action. But oftentimes what it takes is adapting either a community solution or an individual solution into a classroom level solution. And that's what it really takes to hit that sweet spot, because there's not a whole lot that's specifically focused already for classrooms. So go ahead and investigate these classroom level climate actions. Some of them feel super action oriented, like creating a xeriscape garden is a really cool one. Visiting the coast, well, specifically looking at what is needed for coastal restoration, might feel one step removed from something like this, but it's still very helpful for students if they take that visit with that lens. So it expands what that action context is. Some of the actions are setting up for action rather than jumping in directly. But go ahead and investigate that classroom level climate action for the chapter you opened up. And if you find one that appeals to you, there's just 4 per chapter. Go ahead and pop it in the chat, and you can just include that single description of it. See what might feel like a fun possibility for your students. Again, these are not meant to be comprehensive, just examples for you to consider and engage with. Yeah, feel free to put other classroom level actions in too, if these inspire something, or you're already doing something. Love to know that. I'll wait for just a few more to trickle in there. Thank you. So I'm almost done with the presentation section of this webinar. I'm going to start taking questions in a few minutes here. There's just a couple other things I'd like to highlight for you. We've looked at some of the chapters of the National Climate Assessment, and I mentioned this download section to you. In each one of the chapters for the Educator's Guide, you'll see that we chose two pieces of the art from the Art by Climate project from the National Climate Assessment here. The entire set is here in the National Climate Assessment. And pop that in the chat. You can scroll through. What's really cool about this is this collection includes works by students, it includes work by nationally renowned artists and everybody in between. And I want to highlight this specifically to go back to that idea that when we're engaging with climate change and moving beyond awareness, that takes tools that help us process the emotions that are associated with climate change. It takes a multidisciplinary approach that includes the science, but also includes other subjects like social studies, English language arts, art, math, civics, so many ways to engage climate change. And this Art by Climate section, I think, helps to do that in really cool ways. Xavier Cortada is an artist in Florida, and he does this to show how far above sea level a given space is. So this is 7 feet above sea level. And just by popping up a piece of art like that, you can have so many conversations with students about what that could mean for their communities, what that means for other coastal communities and places they know and love. So this whole art section, I think, can help you explore questions and topics with students that you might not otherwise be able to do. And even if you just choose one of these and pop it up after a lesson that is not focused on art, like if you're looking at a very science-focused lesson and you pop up an image like this and just say, hey, we were just thinking about urban heat islands and cities. What does this image say to you after our investigation? So many ways to engage with this collection, and I encourage you to play with it and explore it. So with that being said, I want to mention that for the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, there's a lot of different ways to engage. Please use and explore our collection, use and explore the teaching guidance. You can also promote us on social media. Gina just set up our Blue Sky account. Maybe you could pop that in the chat, Gina. And we are happy to do professional development. If you are part of a school or a district or just want to get a group together and have us jump in for a few minutes to go into a specific topic or give an overview on our resources or teaching guidance. And if you would like to include the clean collection on your website through our widget, that is also possible to do. So lots of ways to engage here. I think Seth is going to share this slide set with participants, so you'll be able to see and review all of those. And if you have specific questions that you don't want to jump in and ask, or maybe we don't have time for in our question and answer period, please feel free to email our general clean email or email me directly. And with that, I'm going to stop the presentation mode here and check in on questions from participants. Still have a lot of folks here, so anything we covered that you're curious about, I'll do my best on the National Climate Assessment or any clean tools that you noticed or are curious about. You can throw questions in the chat or you can ask directly. Gina, Seth, were there any questions in the chat that I missed during the course of the presentation? You're muted there, Gina.
I think that we're all there were a lot of questions, but I think that they were all content related questions based on the prompt. And yeah, I will just echo that the recording will be shared. Seth is going to put it on the Climate Generation website, and we'll also have it put up on the Clean website.
And Patrick, it does look like Corrine has a question, so go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like.
Yeah. So my question for Patrick is in reference to the 2024 Climate Literacy Principles Guide that was released in September, and its location on the Clean website, the CleanNet website. Last time I was there, it looked like the old one was in place, and I was looking for the new one, which had been there a few days earlier. So I'm curious about whether you have an answer for that, as well as whether or not you can address the connection of the Climate Literacy Principles Guide to the interdevelopmental goals, skills of the United Nations. That I think there's like a companion piece that I got wind was going to be together. I'm not sure if you can address either of those things. Sorry.
In my capacity with the NOAA Climate Program Office, I have to say that the new climate literacy principles were taken down from USGCRP, the United States Global Change Research Program, who produced the new guide, and were taken off of climate.gov and the Teaching Climate section there because they were found to be out of compliance with an executive order regarding DEI because of some of the content therein. So they are no longer available on those sources. And because CLEAN is syndicated through climate.gov, we have to remain in step with our federal partners. And we're asked to do that there as well. So what I will say is I'm working closely with OER Commons, Open Education Resource Commons, and we are going to put some climate literacy support up there. And if they choose to include the principles, which you mentioned did come out last fall, that's where you will find them. I'm sorry, I can't go more into that
No,
guide.
understood, but I do have a quick question about that.
Yeah.
I understand the barriers for hosting that material given the current executive order structures. What are the implications for those of us who are not encumbered by those same restrictions for hosting the climate literacy guide that is updated for 2024? Is that something that Climate Generation can host on their website? Can state agencies host that document on their websites for climate education? Can private entities? Is there a way that we can sort of like, I don't know, spread it around so that it's a little bit easier to find in your own neck of the woods, but also harder to track when it needs to be taken down? When it needs to be taken down.
Sure. I'd say that it's important that those receiving federal funding consider that when they're posting tools that have been taken off of federal sites. And other than that, it was a publication that was downloadable and shareable. It was reviewed and confirmed before it was taken back for further review. So if you have that and posting it does not conflict with your funding sources, that would be up to you.
Great. Well, then I'm going to take this opportunity to stick my neck out and just say it as plain as possible that if you are in a capacity on this call to do that, consider it a small act of resistance and put it on your website, please, because it's important.
Thank you.
And thank you, Patrick, for answering all those great questions. Feel free to reach directly out to myself at Climate Generation. That is a conversation we've been having this week is making sure folks do have direct access. And Patrick, I know there was a second part to that question. I don't know if you remember the specifics there. Otherwise, there are a couple of questions in the chat that came up.
Yeah, I appreciate the second part of that question. I can't really delve into the principles right now, the 2024 climate literacy principles. So I think that you can investigate that for sure. There are connections there, I think. So let me jump into some of the ones in the chat here.
Can you talk a little bit more, Patrick, about the connection between the IPCC assessment and the National Climate Assessment? There is a question from Anna asking, why did you choose the fifth IPCC climate assessment, not the sixth? And I think there might be some confusion about the relationship between the two.
Sure. They're related in as much as the IPCC report is a global report that brings together our comprehensive knowledge on climate change, and the National Climate Assessment is the national equivalent of that brings together multiple sectors of knowledge and science to address climate change for our country. The fifth National Climate Assessment, which is that fifth that you're probably thinking I mentioned, that is the most recent that was published in 2023. The most recent IPCC reports don't follow that same numbering. They're on different time schedules. That addresses that. Other questions?
We have another question about the art competition. I'm not sure. Sam is asking, will the art competition happen again, student or professional? And that's probably more of a question for the USGCRP since we don't run that, but a lot of things are, I think, slowing down right now. So
I'll say that it's unclear what will be included in the sixth National Climate Assessment at this point. And they started work on that last year, but we shall see. Sorry, we don't have more clarity on that right now. Okay. Other questions that came up in the chat. Let me scroll up, see if I can find some. So Fawn asked about shifting range maps for different plants and wildlife. That's a really interesting question. I don't know offhand where that would be located in the National Climate Assessment, but let's have a look and see in the chapter section when you look at ecosystems, and specifically if you're interested in forest or coast or a ecosystem that's called out, I think you could find it there. But in the species change and biodiversity loss section, the impacts to ecosystem services, some of those key messages in that chapter 8 will probably be a good place to start. And there are a few maps there that have to do with phenology and changes occurring in those ecosystems. So here is chapter 8. Start there. I'll also mention climate.gov has some cool mapping tools that are currently being updated. There's a really cool set of tools that are going to come together called CRIS. Let me get that acronym for you. Climate Resilience Information System, that will include climate data and mapping tools from NOAA and other federal agencies. And this is still moving forward. I'll throw some introductory information about CRIS in here. And that also, thinking about more regionally focused maps, I want to mention the National Climate Assessment Atlas, which, as you look up at the top of the assessment, I'm on chapter 8 here, but you have the chapters, downloads, art by climate, and the Atlas section here, which will take you to a different tool from Global Change, but it does have some sections that help you get a little bit more regional on your focus. The sets of climate maps will get you down to a pretty close level. And there's one other tool that I'll pop up and share. In just a moment. The climate mapping for resilience and adaptation is, or CAMRA, if you would like to use the acronym. This is a mapping tool that will get you down to a county level of data. So if you're looking for more local data to share with your students and explore, this is a really fun tool to use. All right. Other questions? If there are no more. I think we've covered most of it. Would anyone else like to jump in with a question? If not, I will highlight one other thing that I mentioned, but another tool to explore all of this information is the Climate Resiliency Toolkit. In addition to the National Climate Assessment, this can be a great way to think about resilience for your community. This toolkit has the case studies that I mentioned before, a set of tools. There have been funding opportunities at various times, but I really like this step-by-step guide to resilience from a community perspective. This is especially useful for planners, but the Climate Resiliency Toolkit is awesome to engage with students who are ready to jump into something at that level, to use an official tool to look at what might be helpful for their community. So there's another thing to play with if you would like. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, needs for further information or tools that I may have at my disposal?
And feel free to drop any last minute questions or come off mute, but I just want to shout out Patrick. Thank you so much for sharing all of that amazing information. I found myself realizing that I've definitely missed out on some opportunities to dive into that resource, as it's pretty incredible what is there. And as I mentioned, this recording, the slide deck that Patrick has shared, and then hopefully as many of those resources that have been thrown in the chat will be sent in a follow-up email. I will also just put in registration information for our next workshop in this series from a high school educator on envisioning kind of that brighter future of really making sure that students kind of foresee what climate action can look like for themselves and their community. And Patrick, there is, it looks like, one other question that I'm not sure if you're able to answer that or not, on if the National Weather Service has been impacted by the executive order you mentioned before or others.
I will say that there are multiple agencies currently experiencing changes in staffing and releasing probationary employees, and definitely keep up with that. It's likely to affect nearly all agencies. Oh, the list of widgets. I don't have a list of widgets necessarily, seeing that question, but I will put the link to the clean widget.
I can put it in here. I've got it up.
Yeah. This is a way to add a clean search to your website. And while I am sure there are other awesome widgets available, this one's my favorite. I also want to mention that we have a webinar series coming up. I put that email in the link to register in the chat that has some very basic info about it. But let me also throw that list of speakers for this webinar series in, because I am super excited about this for clean. And if you would like to jump in to hear some awesome folks talk, this is a good one. And again, that's with you can register for any and all of those through this link. Oh,
Well, thank you again so much, Patrick. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, but I will stick around for a couple of minutes if anybody has any questions about anything that came up today. But thank you all for joining us and look forward to seeing you in the future.